Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. And in the spirit of the new year, we wanted to talk a little bit about how you can set realistic goals as a writer. And I know Jessica's going to have a lot of thoughts on this too, because Jessica has a lot of thoughts on goals in general.
That's for sure.
But I think every year we do a goal video, I think almost every year.
Because
And
every year we do goals.
right. And we talk about all the things that you can do as a writer. But I think where it probably gets away from most people is that they're shooting for the stars, which I think is always great, right? I think it's good to have those aspirations, but they're aspirations, they're not realistic, achievable goals, which is what we wanted to talk about and how you can do that as a writer.
And I think one of the problems that writers often have when creating goals is they create goals where all of their goals are completely outside of their control. Like get an agent. Well, that is a good goal, but if you don't make up a plan to make that achievable, it's kind of outside your control because it's someone else's decision of whether you'll have an agent. So you want to have things like that that might be difficult to achieve, but you also need things that are more in your control and power, because otherwise it's just really discouraging.
But can we use that though as an example then?
Yes, I
Because
think we should.
the one thing that you have always made us do as agents is just to work backwards, to like reverse engineer our goals. So if an author has the goal, the ultimate goal, or the ultimate end game, right, is to get an agent this year. How do they work backwards to set their realistic goals for the year?
Yeah. And we do something similar. I just want to use what we do as a comparison too, to show how there are things that are out of control. So we'll do a goal often of sell 30 books this year. Well, to a huge part, like selling a book is out of our control because the editor has to want to buy the book. So
It's
that's
the
in their
result.
hands. Right. So we work backwards in the same way you're going to do with the, getting an agent.
Yeah. So for if that's your goal, the things that are within your control are there are plenty of things that are actually within your
Finishing
control.
your book. First
Finish
step.
your
You
book.
got it. But not just finish. What I would say is before you get an agent, you have to finish your book, revise your book, all of those
Tweaks.
things have to be that step towards that. So, you know, if finishing your book is a goal, that's great, but I don't think finishing is what's going to get you an agent. The
No.
revisions and the polishing are where it's going to take to the agent.
But it's a huge milestone. So I think if your
Right.
goal is to get an agent, it is important to recognize that that's your first milestone to finish, to do the critiques, make sure it's fully up to snuff where you need it to be.
Yep.
You can research agents, and I'm separating that out from querying agents because it's a completely different job and a
Agreed.
whole step before. But
Yep.
researching your first round, first two, first three rounds of agents of who you will query is a huge undertaking. And I think is where every author who wants to start querying should start.
And I would maybe even expand that to researching the industry because
Yeah, maybe that's the
researching
first step.
agent, what?
Maybe that's even before researching agents.
Yeah, because I think, part of getting an agent is not just writing a book, but writing a marketable book, a book that agents can sell. So you can't just write any book. So researching the industry, and that includes probably spending time in the bookstore, you know, understanding who's on the bestseller list, what's hot right now, looking at Publishers Marketplace to see what's selling right now, is all part of those steps to finding an agent.
And on the technical side too, how to write a query letter, what a query is, what the query process is. We've just done a video on this. Make sure you go watch that last week, next week, one of the two. So knowing the actual process that you have to take, knowing the publishers, all of that is crucial. And I think will make querying a lot easier too. Because if you can look at an agent's list and say, oh, they sold to Putnam and know who Putnam is and know what Putnam publishes, it does also change the research game for you.
Yep, knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. Yeah.
Uh,
And then the actual querying. You cannot control when you're getting your responses. You can control who you query, when you query them, and how many folks you query at a time.
Yeah, one of the things I always say is there are a lot of agents, my understanding is, who have no response means no.
I hate that.
I'd hate that too. BookEnds has a policy that we respond to all queries. This policy will never change. BookEnds will do a lot of changing and growing and evolving, but that's a policy that has never changed and will never change. There are other agencies who their answer is, I guess they just delete the queries they don't want and the authors will know. You can't control that. But what you can control is how long you give an agent before you decide that they've no responded. And my advice to that is in your spreadsheet of agents, you know, you're tracking all of those and what kind of responses you're getting. You're tracking when that query was sent. On those no response agents, and you'll know this because you've done your research, you have a date set. If they don't get back to you by that date, you consider it a reject. And that gives you power over your list and moving forward rather than feeling stagnant and hopeful that maybe someone hadn't just read it yet when you have no way of knowing.
And we're not saying withdraw, we're not saying
No.
close it out with them. Just mentally make a shift and move
Yep.
on
Yeah. In
because they
fact,
can still get back to you.
right. So when I'm sending submissions for clients, I have, this section for this client and all the editors. And when I get a rejection, it moves to the bottom of the list so that it separates them out from those that are still under consideration. If you do something similar to that with your list, it moves them under there. They're still on your list, but they're no longer taking up mental and emotional space for you.
Yep, exactly. And then also you can control starting your next thing and continuing to move your career forward. I think
So important.
querying is one of those things in publishing that makes you feel stuck. It makes you feel like this is the spot I'm in. I'm not moving in any direction. I'm just here waiting. And
Yeah.
I think if you start working on your next thing or researching your next thing or reading a ton, anything you can control while you're in that query space will make it feel a whole lot less sucky. Like it's a lot easier to query when you are simultaneously moving forward.
Yeah, a huge milestone in the querying process is, of course, getting a request for more material. But another one is you're getting rejections on your material, but you're getting agents or an agent who says, this one didn't work for me, but I would love to see your next book. If you are already in the middle of that next book, you are that much closer.
And also track that. Don't forget to track that.
Yeah.
It's important that you
In
track.
fact, I would have your submission list for that book that you're writing. If you are on submission, I would be creating the submission list for the next book as you go along. So any agent who gives you feedback like that automatically goes on the list for the next book. Any agent who maybe never replied or, just clearly didn't connect with your book or understand your book, then you can find a different agent at that agency, perhaps.
Querying on like on that job experience is research too. Like how they
Mm-hmm.
respond to you and react with you and your query is research.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So you can take this kind of process and apply it to any goal. Whether you're agented or you're just starting to write your first book, your goals can be write the first chapter, write the second. Like you can set those little goals. Your goals should be quantifiable, they should be accessible, and they should be specific. I think when you have that goal, become a New York Times bestseller, right? Like everybody wants to become a New York Times bestseller. That is not specific. Like it is like that's the thing we want to do, but how? Become a New York Times bestseller with what book? With what? How are you going to do that? With what publisher? All of these steps are being missed because you're not being as specific as possible. So if you boil that down and you bring yourself to stage one, make the most specific goal to get you to stage two. Make the most specific goal to get you from there to stage three. And I think when you do it that way, it feels a lot less daunting. Everybody says publishing is slow, but when you break it down that way, it's actually kind of fast.
Yeah, that's true. When we started goals years ago and it just used to be goals. And then we evolved into adding what we call an action plan. So if my goal is to have 2 New York Times bestsellers this year, I have to have an action plan to make that happen. The universe doesn't just hand me stuff while I sit here and crochet my wobbles.
Did you
I
get
did.
those?
I did.
Okay.
I have not yet tried it. Honestly, I opened the packet and it was totally intimidating. So I'm on
Yeah,
the
it's
right.
overwhelming, isn't it?
But anyway, that aside, when I do finally do one, even if it's half-assed, I will bring it here to show everybody.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah. But anyway, so we have to have an action plan to make it happen because you can't just sit around and let things happen. You have to make them happen and having that action plan. So if you want a New York Times bestseller, you have to decide what kind of book you're going to write, not just any book that you decide to write because you just want to write any kind of book or all the books is going to make that happen.
And you have a lot to learn too. You have to learn how to reach readers. You have to learn how to market and publicize and work with the publicity team and use social media if you don't know how to do that, or you have to brand yourself. There's so much
Yeah,
that goes into that. It's not just put a book on the shelves and expect it to become a
right.
bestseller. No New York Times bestsellers will tell you that they've just put a book out and it became a bestseller.
No,
It's work.
no. And so I think at the end of the day, what we've learned is with every goal, you can have any goal you want. But to make it achievable, you have to set up a plan. And your goals for the year should also be defining your plan for how you're going to work throughout the year.
Yeah,
So my goals are actually sitting right here on my desk with my action plans.
mine or not.
So so that next to my vision board. But this way, when I am thinking, what am I going to do today? Well, what do I want out of this year? Because that's what I need to be doing. That needs to be my focus. So I could be crocheting, or which is not one of my goals, just so
It
everybody knows.
could be.
It's really not.
No, but I'm just saying for those out there, it could be.
But, so I need to look at this plan and go, well, if I'm going to get that, then I better get to work on those action plans because sitting here and doing other things is not going to help me achieve that.
Yeah, we love when I read this. I'm actually reading it now. I read it every year in the beginning of the year.
Atomic
I
Habits.
love that book so much. But we love that book. And James Clear, the author, says that, great name, says, by the way, that the goals should, like, he doesn't like goals, he likes systems because goals signify having an end point, right?
Right.
And I think every author can relate to this. Once you get one New York Times bestseller, I mean, you're gonna want a second one. So having that as a goal, it feels a lot like a finish line. Whereas if you're setting yourself up as having these systems, you're someone who writes 1,000 words every week. You're someone who
Right.
sends 3 queries every week. You have set yourself up with a system that you can live by. And then therefore your success will come because you're doing things that successful people do
Yeah.
regularly too. It's not just something you're doing once and then
Yes.
January's over. I don't have to, it's new year, back to the old me. So
No, I love that. I think that's perfect.
yeah, I love that book. Buy that book, read that book. I'm sure everybody's heard about that book at this point. So
Yeah, we do read it every year here. And then anytime he's on a podcast, because he's on podcasts all January, I am in every single one as if I haven't heard his stories a billion times.
it doesn't matter. It's just the refresh, the like being, sometimes you just need to be told it again, and that's what I think all self-help is anyway, right? You're told it in a different way. It's the packaging that you're told it. So maybe we'll get through to someone, maybe James Clear will get through to someone.
Well,
However
the
you
other
hear it.
thing I find with Atomic Habits and with other books I've reread, because I have a number of them I've reread, is that as I'm moving forward and achieving more and more, I go back to the book because now I'm ready for something different that I didn't see the first time. So I'm not getting the same information out of it each time
You're
because
a different
I'm
person.
at a different place. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I first read that book, I had no systems at all, or I was barely setting goals. Also, was at a different point in my career. Now you read
Right.
it, it's like there's so much that has changed that one piece might hit you better. So hopefully this video is that for someone. So set realistic goals. Don't set that crazy goal. Get specific, get in the nitty gritty, get a little uncomfortable, right? Like do the things that I just don't want to do it. Do it.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what's going to make 2024 or any year, if you're watching this next year or whatever, the most successful.
And
Because
I will add one quick thing. Be ready for change. Don't write them down and expect that in October you still have to be doing these exact things because the year is going to take on different things. Your goals are going to take on, your goals might change, and that is all okay. So I think it's really important to be ready to adjust as needed.
yeah, when you get that agent, you're going to need new goals.
Yep. Yep. Excellent.
Okay. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have questions or goals you want to share with other watchers, viewers, whatever, put them in the comments below. But thank you for watching, and we'll be back here next week.
Bye.